Hi Pranil, thanks for speaking to me today. First things first, so I want to know when did you identify this particular problem, and once you identified it, how did you go about it?
So even today we don't consider ourselves academicians, we are more practitioners. So right after engineering 2001, I started teaching. So walked into a evening school volunteering to be a teacher. So asked them would they require a free mathematics teacher. That's what I consider myself fairly good at. And I started teaching maths. I did that for almost 5 years. In between, an MBA degree happened. Got in touch with a few friends who were volunteering like me, and then we said, okay, is there a way where we could come together instead of doing freelance volunteering to do something structured. And in the 5 years preceding that, some of the things that I had learned were essentially around the sector has a lot of passion, but it does not have enough of measurement. So a lot of efforts go into it. Are we really measuring how much value do we add? So when we got together around 2006, we said we were just uh, back from a MBA degree, and some amount of business thinking was there. So we said if we were to pool our resources in terms of time, energy, and money, which would be that one area where we could impact most. So multiple deliberations, we arrived at employability, and employability then consisted of two parts: computers and English. And computers seemed to be a capital intensive play, didn't really have so much money to start out with. And so we said, okay, let's do something in the area of English. Because it was a subject and all of us had volunteered and I had done some extensive teaching over the last 5 years, we said perhaps that's something that could come easy to us, while it did come up as a surprise. Because once you started doing this, we realized that the problems are not as simple as they seem to be. The problems are much deeper. And from that point, it is only about making assumptions, going into the field, failing, coming back, correcting those assumptions, going back. So, what we call rapid prototyping, or in a sense, multiple iterations, where every time the market or the field proves you wrong, and then you come back and alter your assumptions. And hence, I call ourselves practitioners, because the field has taught us whatever we have been taught. So, for example, how do the urban low income communities struggle with English vis a vis the rural communities who perhaps have no exposure to English at all? Whether kids who study in a particular medium in Bombay, for example, Urdu, how difficult are their challenges vis a vis those who study, let's say, in Kannada medium schools? Is there a difference, right? And all these assumptions essentially led us to developing products, and these products would invariably fail. So the one constant theme over the years has been repeated failures, uh, which has led us today to believe that finally we have developed a product which could make a tangible difference in the area of English learning for kids who come from what we call underserved communities.
So Pranil, you have developed a new English learning module or a program. Um, what is it about primarily?
So essentially developed a set of ruler algorithm which translates English into any Sanskrit originated language and vice versa. So essentially exactly like Google Translate, just that we are grammatically more correct. This is not to compete with Google, right? Because they translate in languages across the world. But if you were to put a sentence string in English and try to see what its meaning is in Marathi, which perhaps you are very comfortable with, you realize that Google doesn't do a very good job. Right? It throws very fast, but grammatically it's incorrect. That's because Google works on a concept called statistical probability, which means more the searches around the same string, Google will continue to get better. Now we look at it from a language perspective, and hence if you apply our rules on the same string, the response or the output is going to be a near correct sentence in your mother tongue. Right? Because it's Sanskrit originated, it works for almost every single language in this country. So our rules work across Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Odia, Bengali, Kannada. That doesn't matter. So this is an algorithm. What's the one thing that excites us? We want to see our kids access professional education. And who are our kids? Kids who study in regional language schools. And how many are they? 250 million kids who study in different regional language government schools across the country. Why can't they access professional education? Because we make them study in the regional language schools for 12 years, and then suddenly when they reach 11, we say, okay, here's this world of science, and you can choose to become an engineer, a doctor, an architect, or chartered accountant, but hold, this is only available in English. Can you eliminate or realistically reduce significantly the barriers which stop kids from regional language communities or backgrounds opt for professional courses? And what's that single biggest non-financial barrier? The inability to cope up with English. From a product point of view, we have reached a fair stage of evolution, good enough for us to now be seriously believing in that if we take the right business model decisions, we could possibly have a nationwide impact. But imagine we succeed in next 10 years time. Today, who are the kids who opt for IITs or IIMs or kids who opt for any engineering courses, right? These are kids who are competing with about 200 million kids outside of that competition. So imagine in 10 years time, if this 200 million kids no longer feel scared of English, in fact they feel enabled. To an extent they say, I can make a career choice which necessitates English. Suddenly these 200 million kids who today are not given a chance to compete comes into the mainstream. So honestly I hope that I will be around to see this kind of competition, that these 200 million kids will suddenly come there and say, I now want to stake claim to that which I was never allowed to stake claim to.
Pranil, you are a Ashoka Fellow, and I think in November of 2014 you got a Ashoka Fellowship. How did that happen?
So honestly, I don't know how it happened because you can't nominate yourself. So Ashoka gets in touch with you because someone somewhere would have mentioned your name. So today, now that I am a fellow, we get mails asking for nominations of people who we believe can be recommended to Ashoka for a fellowship. So someone must have recommended. I don't know, and that's the good part about it because uh, or Ashoka through its work comes in touch with a lot of solutions, right? So English learning is such a great aspiration, not just because it adds to self-esteem, but also because it opens up doors. It is a, it is a problem which is existing across the country. So Ashoka through its work in education may have come across. So I don't know honestly how it happened, but I got in touch. And I got in touch and they asked, would you be interested? And obviously you don't say no if you are in the sector. There is slight history to that. In 2006, after having taught in the sector for about 5 years, I was essentially volunteering as a mathematics teacher in communities and in evening schools. The forward had just begun, and I read a book called How to Change the World, David Bornstein. So David Bornstein had covered the stories of about 13, 14 Ashoka fellows, and it had such a phenomenal, profound influence of me. And from that day onwards, I actually continued to look up the Ashoka website, which is a phenomenal, database of profiles of individuals who are trying to do something worthwhile. And then it kind of came like a full circle when I get a call from them in around August or July 2014 saying that we heard about you, would you be interested? And I said obviously yes. It's a very intense, thorough selection process. So a lot of calls because they are based in Bangalore, then personal visits, then visits to the field, and then there is a 2 day selection process in Bangalore. And the deal is that every single step is a filter. So you could fail at the telephonic round, you could fail at the physical round, so you could fail at every stage.
How many steps are there?
So 6 steps.
Okay. Right from the day you received the call till you were.
Yeah, so about 5 to 6 steps. And the manner in which they look at fellows, they have their own metric which focuses a lot on the integrity of the person and uh, and the and the commitment to the cause. I don't remember the exact parameters. What it tells is that the business model is important, right? For all of us, business model is important. But uh, what Ashoka kind of says is more important is the fellow, more important is his journey, more important are his struggles. And this fellowship in that sense is uh, uh, what you call a testament or a compliment to the fact that you have done a phenomenal job hanging around there for such a long time. And we at Ashoka would want to appreciate and acknowledge that kind of effort. So yes, it means a lot. It means a lot because for most of the social entrepreneurs that you will meet, right, have gone through so many struggles. The struggles are humbling,
Correct.
and awards and recognitions have so far and so few to come that you don't really work anymore for them. Right? You just want to make sure that you are much closer to what you want to be. You're trying to put your best product out to serve the community better. And hence, when Ashoka fellowship happens, for me personally, it seemed like a validation of sorts, because it said perhaps someone else who I have looked up to believes that there is merit, believes that there is hope, there is potential in this. So for me, it has been the finest compliment.
How has it changed your life?
So
After you got
obviously, a lot
fellowship?
of credibility gets attached.
I mean, I'm
to
sure
it.
world must be looking at it in different light.
I am not too sure about that, but yes, people in the sector who know how difficult Ashoka Fellowship is to come and get uh, credibility is better now. Today, if I write a mail asking someone to meet, maybe 5 years before I would have had to write to 25 people to get one meeting. Today I may have to write 15 people to get one meeting. So obviously there is the element of credibility. So if you want, you may choose to meet because you say, okay, the guy's credibility has been ticked off. He is a fellow, which means at least what he is doing is worth my time to spare. That's one. Obviously it helps significantly in your fundraising efforts. It was very difficult to convince your parents that I am working for an NGO, right? I have struggled that, I continue to struggle that, right? It is not something that most people would want their kids to grow up and do. The small validations like Ashoka Fellowship also goes a long way in buying peace at home, right?
So, how do you assess your own performance so far? I'm sure. I mean, at least many people, social entrepreneurs I met, they are very humble in accepting their achievements, and the fact that you are a Ashoka Fellow itself speaks for it. But what I'm really interested in knowing is, how does Pranil Nayak assess his own self?
So I think I always believe that perhaps where we are today, we could have been at the same stage maybe 4 years before. It would have been still fascinating, but it hasn't happened. Where we are today makes us believe that we have a definite chance of solving the problem. But what lies ahead is significantly much more in terms of the quantum of work. Completely different ball game. The complexity is much different from what we have done in the past. We developed products, right? So we thought like product managers. Now what are we dealing with? We're dealing with building an institution, laying out the business model, looking for collaboration. It's a different ball game altogether. It's going to be a tough job. I think we've done reasonably well reaching here, staying alive, keeping our heads above water.
So, where would Leap Forward be 5 years from now?
So I hope we have integrated ourselves into the systems which are responsible for creating education outcomes. So the way I look at it is perhaps all of our content. So we are open source. So every single piece of content that we would have created over the years, when it is in perfect form and shape, it goes on the website for public consumption. Uh, People are free to do whatever they want to do with it. We built it with donor money, and hence it has to be treated as open source. So we hope that in 5 years' time we would have created really world-class content and products which have delivered value, tangible, visible, and at scale. And it has in some way integrated itself with the existing ecosystems of learning. It would be really shame if Leap Forward stays around for another 10 years, which means that the problem is still around. Leap Forward should be around but solving some other problem. So the idea is to die. Idea is to die gracefully, which means the problem is there, problem solved, solution integrated. And there is no reason for us to survive beyond that.
I really thank you for taking the time out from
Pleasure.
your